Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished another set of push-ups on the concrete floor of the military training facility. Around her, 23 men in camouflage uniforms continued their exercises, their grunts and heavy breathing filling the humid air of the Virginia base. She had been the only woman in this advanced combat training program for 6 months now, and every single day felt like a test she had to pass over and over again. The morning sun streamed through the high windows of the gymnasium as Sergeant Williams blew his whistle. "Fall in for weapon inspection," he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. Maria jumped to her feet and lined up with the others, her M4 rifle clean and ready. She had learned early that being late or unprepared was not an option when you were already fighting an uphill battle for respect. Commander Jake Morrison walked into the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. At 38, he was a decorated Navy SEAL with 15 years of experience in special operations. His reputation preceded him: tough, fair, but absolutely unforgiving when it came to standards. Maria had heard the stories about his missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, how he had led his teams through impossible situations and brought everyone home alive. Morrison's steel-gray eyes moved down the line of soldiers, inspecting each weapon with practiced efficiency. When he reached Maria, he paused longer than usual. She kept her eyes forward, her rifle held at the perfect angle, her breathing steady despite the nervous energy coursing through her veins. "Santos," Morrison said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Step forward." Maria's heart skipped a beat, but she maintained her composure. She had been through this before: the extra scrutiny, the additional questions, the constant need to prove herself worthy of being there. She stepped forward and presented her weapon for inspection. Morrison examined her rifle with meticulous attention to detail. He checked the barrel, tested the action, and inspected every component. The room was silent except for the sound of his hands moving over the weapon. After what felt like an eternity, he handed it back to her. "Clean weapon," he said simply, then moved on to the next soldier. Maria felt a small surge of relief, but she knew this was just the beginning of another long day. The Advanced Combat Training Program was designed to prepare soldiers for the most dangerous missions, and every day brought new challenges that pushed everyone to their limits. After weapons inspection, the group moved outside to the obstacle course. The Virginia heat was already building, and Maria could feel her uniform starting to stick to her skin. The course was a brutal combination of rope climbs, wall scaling, crawling under barbed wire, and navigating through muddy trenches. It had been designed by SEALs to test not just physical strength, but mental toughness and problem-solving under pressure. "Today we're running this course as teams," Sergeant Williams announced. "Two-person teams, and your time will be based on when both team members cross the finish line." Maria glanced around at the other soldiers, wondering who would be willing to partner with her. In previous team exercises, she had often been the last one chosen, not because of her abilities, but because some of the men worried that having a woman on their team might slow them down or make them look weak if they didn't perform well. "Santos and Rodriguez," Williams called out, reading from his clipboard. "Chen and Matthews. Johnson and..." Maria found herself paired with Tony Rodriguez, a stocky soldier from Texas who had been friendly but distant since the program began. He had never been openly hostile toward her, but she could tell he wasn't thrilled about the partnership. "All right, Santos," Rodriguez said as they walked toward the starting line. "Let's just get through this clean, okay? No heroics." Maria nodded, understanding his concern. In previous exercises, some soldiers had tried to overcompensate when working with her, either by trying to do everything themselves or by pushing too hard to prove a point. She had learned that the best approach was to simply focus on doing her job well and letting her performance speak for itself. The whistle blew, and they were off. The first obstacle was a series of rope climbs that required both strength and technique. Maria had spent countless hours practicing her rope climbing, knowing it was one area where her smaller size could actually be an advantage if she used proper form. She attacked the rope with confidence, using her legs to grip and her arms to pull herself upward in smooth, efficient movements. Rodriguez climbed beside her, and she could see the surprise on his face as she kept pace with him easily. They reached the top platform at almost the same time. The next section involved crawling under a series of low-hanging nets while carrying their full gear.
This was where Maria's smaller frame really helped.
While some of the larger soldiers had to struggle to keep their bodies low enough, she moved through the obstacles smoothly, even managing to help Rodriguez when his pack got caught on one of the nets. As they approached the wall scaling section, Maria could see that several other teams were ahead of them. The wall was 12 feet high and required teamwork to get both partners over efficiently. Rodriguez looked at the wall, then at Maria, clearly calculating the best approach. "I'll boost you up first," he said.
"Then, you can help pull me over."
Maria shook her head.
"That'll take too long. Give me an E up, and I'll go over and drop a rope down for you. It'll be faster."
Rodriguez hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He made a stirrup with his hands, and Maria stepped into it. With his boost and her own momentum, she was able to grab the top of the wall and pull herself over in one fluid motion. She immediately dropped a rope down to Rodriguez, who climbed up quickly while she anchored the rope from above. They were making good time now, and Maria could see they had passed two other teams. The final obstacle was a muddy trench that they had to crawl through while staying below the level of simulated machine gun fire.
This section was all about mental toughness and the ability to stay calm under pressure.
Maria had always been good at controlling her breathing and staying focused in stressful situations. As they crawled through the mud, she could hear the pop of blank ammunition being fired overhead and the shouts of instructors yelling at them to keep their heads down. The mud was thick and cold, and it got into everything: her eyes, her nose, her mouth. But she kept moving forward, Rodriguez right beside her. When they finally emerged from the trench and crossed the finish line, Maria was covered in mud from head to toe, but she was smiling. They had finished in 4th place out of 12 teams, a solid performance that put them in the top third. "Not bad, Santos," Rodriguez said as they walked toward the decontamination area.
"You held your own out there."
It wasn't exactly high praise, but Maria could hear the genuine respect in his voice. It was a small victory, but she had learned to appreciate these moments of acceptance when they came. Commander Morrison had been watching the exercise from an observation tower, taking notes on each team's performance. Maria had noticed him several times during the course, his eyes tracking her movements as she navigated each obstacle. She wondered what he was thinking, whether he was looking for reasons to doubt her capabilities or actually evaluating her potential. After cleaning up and changing into fresh uniforms, the group gathered in a classroom for a tactical briefing. Morrison stood at the front of the room, a large map of a fictional urban environment projected on the screen behind him.
"Tomorrow we begin urban warfare simulation," he announced.
"You'll be operating in teams of 4, conducting house-to-house searches in a mock city environment.
The scenario involves hostage rescue, and you'll be facing live opposition forces using simunition rounds." Simunition was a type of training ammunition that could cause pain and leave marks but wasn't lethal. Maria had trained with it before, and she knew that getting hit by simunition rounds was motivation enough to take the exercise seriously. "Team assignments are posted on the board," Morrison continued. "Study your mission briefs tonight.
Tomorrow's exercise will test everything you've learned about small unit tactics, communication, and decision-making under fire."
"Questions?"
Maria looked at the team assignments and felt her stomach drop. She was assigned to Team Charlie with Rodriguez, who she had worked well with during the obstacle course, but also with Jackson and Mueller, two soldiers who had made their skepticism about her presence in the program very clear from day one. Staff Sergeant Jackson was a career soldier with 12 years of experience who often made comments about how standards were being lowered to accommodate political correctness. Mueller was younger but had adopted Jackson's attitude, seeming to view Maria as a liability that could get them all in trouble. As the briefing ended and soldiers began filing out of the classroom, Maria stayed behind to study the team assignment board more carefully. She wanted to understand exactly what she was walking into. "Worried about tomorrow?" a voice said behind her. Maria turned to see Commander Morrison standing a few feet away. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes that came from years of squinting in desert sun and the small scar on his chin from some long-ago mission. "No, sir," Maria replied automatically.
"Just reviewing the assignments."
Morrison stepped closer to the board, his hands clasped behind his back. Jackson and Muller are good soldiers, he said quietly.
But they have some old-school attitudes about women in combat roles. Maria wasn't sure how to respond. Was Morrison warning her, testing her, or just making conversation? She decided honesty was the best approach. I'm aware of their concerns, sir. But I'm here to prove myself through performance, not to change anyone's mind through arguments. Morrison nodded slowly. Smart approach.
But be aware that tomorrow's exercise is going to be particularly challenging. The opposition force is made up of instructors from the special operations community. They know every trick in the book, and they won't go easy on anyone. I understand, sir. Do you? Morrison asked, turning to look directly at her.
Because this isn't just about physical fitness or marksmanship anymore.
Tomorrow is about life and death decision-making, about trusting your teammates and having them trust you.
In a real hostage rescue situation, one person's mistake can get innocent people killed.
Maria felt the weight of his words. She had known that the training was building towards something like this, but hearing it stated so directly made the stakes feel very real. I won't let my team down, sir, she said firmly.
Morrison studied her face for a long moment. We'll see, he said finally, then walked away. That evening, Maria sat in her quarters studying the mission brief.
The scenario was complex. A terrorist cell had taken hostages in a 3-story building in the mock urban environment. Intelligence suggested there were between 4 and 6 hostiles, armed with assault rifles and, possibly, explosives.
The hostages were civilian contractors, including women and children.
Team Charlie's assignment was to clear the 2nd floor while other teams handled the ground level and top floor simultaneously. They would have to move quickly and efficiently, neutralizing threats while avoiding harm to any hostages they encountered. Maria had participated in similar exercises before, but never with such high stakes or realistic opposition. She spent hours memorizing the building layout, thinking through different scenarios and possible complications. She knew that tomorrow would be the biggest test of her abilities since joining the program. As she lay in her narrow military bunk that night, Maria thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. Growing up in a working-class family in Arizona, she had always been drawn to challenges that others said were impossible. When other girls her age were playing with dolls, she was climbing trees and racing bicycles with the neighborhood boys. Her father, a veteran of the Gulf War, had always encouraged her to push herself.
Mija, he would say, the world is going to tell you there are things you can't do because you're a woman. Don't listen to them. Show them what you can do instead.
That philosophy had carried her through high school, where she excelled in athletics and academics despite coming from a school with limited resources. It had motivated her through 4 years of college ROTC, where she was often the only woman in advanced training courses. And it had driven her to volunteer for this elite program, even knowing that she would face skepticism and resistance every step of the way. But tomorrow would be different from anything she had faced before.
Tomorrow, the theoretical would become practical.
The training would become as close to real combat as possible without actually putting lives at risk. And her teammates' willingness to trust her could mean the difference between mission success and failure. Maria closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing thoughts. She had prepared as much as she could. Her equipment was ready, her weapon was clean, and she knew the mission inside and out. Tomorrow, she would have to prove that all the training, all the preparation, and all the determination had been worth it. The alarm clock beside her bunk showed 2,200 hours. Lights out was at 2,200, and reveille would come at 0500. That gave her 7 hours to sleep, though she doubted she would get much rest with everything running through her mind. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maria's last conscious thought was of Commander Morrison's words, "We'll see." Tomorrow, they definitely would see. And she was determined to make sure that what they saw would change their minds about what she was capable of achieving. The next morning arrived with the harsh sound of the reveille bugle echoing across the base. Maria was already awake, having slept fitfully through the night. She had dreamed about the upcoming exercise, running through various scenarios in her mind even while unconscious. She dressed quickly in her combat uniform, double-checking every piece of equipment. Her body armor was adjusted properly, her ammunition was organized for quick access, and her radio was tuned to the correct frequency. She had learned that in high-stress situations, the small details could make the difference between success and failure. In the Chow Hall, the atmosphere was different from usual. The soldiers were quieter, more focused. Everyone understood that today's exercise was a culmination of months of training. Maria ate her breakfast mechanically, fuel for the challenges ahead rather than something to be enjoyed. Team Charlie gathered at the equipment shed to conduct final checks of their gear. Jackson took charge immediately, his experience showing in the way he organized the team's approach. "All right, listen up," he said, spreading the building plans on a wooden table. "We go in fast and smooth. Rodriguez takes point, Mueller covers the rear, Santos handles communications and backup, and I coordinate movements." Maria noticed that Jackson had assigned her the role that would keep her in the safest position, away from the primary action. It wasn't necessarily wrong tactically, but she suspected it had more to do with his lack of confidence in her abilities than with optimal team structure. "Sir," she said carefully, "I've trained extensively on point and entry techniques. If you think the team would benefit from the assignments are final, Santos," Jackson interrupted. "Your job is communications and backup. Focus on that." Rodriguez and Mueller exchanged glances but said nothing. Maria bit back her frustration and nodded. She would prove her worth whatever role she was given. Commander Morrison appeared at the shed as they were finishing their preparations. He walked around each team member, checking equipment and asking pointed questions about their understanding of the mission. When he reached Maria, he stopped and looked directly into her eyes. "You ready for this, Santos?" "Yes, sir." "Remember, in a real hostage situation, there are no second chances. Every decision matters." "I understand, sir." Morrison nodded and moved on, but Maria felt like there was something more behind his words, some test or challenge that she wasn't quite grasping yet. The mock urban environment was located on the far side of the base, a collection of concrete buildings designed to simulate Middle Eastern architecture. It was realistic enough that several Hollywood movies had used it as a filming location. As Team Charlie approached their staging area, Maria could see other teams moving into position around the target building. Through her earpiece, she could hear the exercise controllers setting up the scenario. The terrorists were already in place, played by special operations instructors who would make the exercise as realistic and challenging as possible. The hostages were volunteers from other units, people who would react with genuine fear and confusion to make the rescue scenario more authentic. "Team Charlie, this is Control," came the voice through her radio. "You are go for insertion in 60 seconds. Remember, this is live fire exercise with simulation. Safety protocols are in effect, but treat every threat as real." Jackson signaled for the team to move to their entry point, a second-floor window that had been left partially open according to intelligence reports. They would rappel from the roof, breach through the window, and clear their assigned section of the building. As they climbed to the roof using an external fire escape, Maria could feel her heart rate increasing. This was it, the moment when months of training would be put to the ultimate test. Around her, she could hear the sounds of other teams moving into position, the whispered communications between team leaders and Control. On the roof, they prepared their rappelling gear quickly and efficiently. Maria had done this dozens of times in training, but never with live opposition waiting below. As she checked her rope and harness, she noticed that her hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. 30 seconds, Jackson whispered into his radio. Maria looked down at the window they would be entering through. Inside, she could see shadows moving, either hostages or hostiles, impossible to tell from this distance. The glass was dark enough that they wouldn't know what was waiting until they were already committed to the entry. 10 seconds, Jackson counted down. "Remember, we go in fast and hard. No hesitation, no second-guessing." The countdown reached 0, and Rodriguez was first through the window, his weapon ready and his movements smooth and professional. Mueller followed immediately, then Maria, with Jackson bringing up the rear. The moment Maria's feet hit the floor inside the building, everything changed. The theoretical became real, the training became application, and months of preparation were distilled into split seconds of decision-making that would determine success or failure.
The second floor of the mock building was a maze of small rooms and narrow hallways designed to challenge even experienced operators. As Maria's boots hit the floor, she immediately assessed the environment around her.
The lighting was dim, filtered through dirty windows, and the air smelled of dust and concrete. Rodriguez had already moved to the left corridor, his weapon raised and ready. Mueller took position covering the right side, while Jackson coordinated their movements through hand signals. Maria found herself in the center of the room, responsible for maintaining communication with other teams and providing backup support as needed. Through her earpiece, she could hear updates from the other teams.
Team Alpha, we have visual on 2 hostiles, ground floor. Engaging now.
The sound of simunition rounds being fired echoed through the building, sharp cracks that made everyone's nerves jump. Team Charlie, report status, came the voice of the exercise controller.
Maria keyed her radio. Control, Team Charlie is on station, 2nd floor. Beginning systematic sweep. Jackson moved them forward methodically.
They had trained for this exact scenario dozens of times, but the presence of real opposition forces made every corner potentially deadly. The instructors playing the terrorists were experienced special operations soldiers who knew how to make the exercise as realistic and challenging as possible. The first room they encountered was empty except for overturned furniture and scattered papers. Rodriguez cleared it quickly, using the techniques they had drilled endlessly in training. But, as they moved toward the second room, everything went wrong. A simunition round cracked past Rodriguez's head, so close that he instinctively ducked and rolled behind a concrete pillar. The round had come from the room they were about to enter, and now they knew there was at least one hostile inside.
Contact, contact.
Jackson whispered into his radio.
1 hostile, 2nd room, east corridor.
Mueller moved to get a better angle on the doorway, but, as he stepped forward, another round caught him squarely in the chest. The simunition round hit hard enough to knock the wind out of him, and he stumbled backward, effectively out of the fight.
Mueller's hit, Rodriguez reported.
I've got eyes on the doorway, but I can't get a clean shot. Maria could see the tactical situation developing. They had 1 man down, 1 man pinned behind cover, and a hostile in a defensive position with good cover and clear fields of fire. In a real combat situation, this was exactly the kind of scenario that could result in mission failure and casualties. Jackson was trying to coordinate a solution, but Maria could see that he was struggling. The textbook approaches they had learned weren't working against an experienced opponent who knew how to exploit the building's layout. They needed someone to create a distraction or find an alternative approach. Through the wall, Maria could hear voices, not the hostile they were engaged with, but what sounded like hostages in the next room over. There were at least 2 or 3 people, including what sounded like a woman crying.
The mission parameters were clear: neutralize hostiles, rescue hostages, minimize casualties.
Maria studied the building layout in her mind. If there was a connecting door between the rooms, she might be able to approach the hostile from an unexpected angle. But it would mean leaving her assigned position and taking initiative that Jackson hadn't authorized. Jackson, she whispered into her radio. I think I can flank left through the adjacent room.
There might be a connecting door. Negative, Jackson responded immediately.
Stay in position and maintain communications.
But Maria could see that their current approach wasn't working.
Rodriguez was still pinned down, Mueller was out of action, and the hostile had all the advantages.
Meanwhile, the hostages in the next room were in immediate danger.
She made a decision that would either prove her worth or get her kicked out of the program. Moving low and quiet, Maria worked her way around the edge of the room toward what appeared to be another doorway. She could hear Jackson hissing into his radio, ordering her to return to position, but she was already committed. The adjacent room was dark and filled with debris, but she could hear the voices more clearly now. There were definitely hostages here. She could hear a woman's voice pleading and what sounded like a child crying. But she could also hear movement that suggested at least one hostile in this room as well. Maria positioned herself carefully at what appeared to be a connecting doorway between the 2 rooms. Through a crack in the door, she could see the hostile who had pinned down Rodriguez. He was focused entirely on the main entry point, unaware that Maria had found an alternative route. She also saw something that changed everything. One of the hostages was tied to a chair directly in the line of fire between the hostile and Rodriguez's position. Any exchange of gunfire could result in a hostage casualty. Maria keyed her radio, speaking as quietly as possible. "Jackson, there's a hostage in direct line of fire. I have a clean shot on the hostile from my position." "Santos, return to your assigned position immediately," Jackson ordered. But Maria could see that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Through her earpiece, she could hear other teams engaging hostiles throughout the building. Time was running out, and every second of delay increased the danger to the hostages. She made another decision that would define her military career. Maria pushed through the connecting door and acquired the hostile in her sights. The instructor playing the terrorist was focused on Rodriguez's position and didn't see her until it was too late. She fired 2 precise simunition rounds that struck him center mass, ending the threat. "Hostile down," she reported into her radio. "Moving to secure hostages." But, as she moved into the room, she discovered that the situation was more complex than they had realized. There were 3 hostages in the room, including a young soldier playing the role of a 10-year-old child. And there was a second hostile who had been hidden in the shadows, waiting for exactly this kind of rescue attempt. Maria found herself face to face with an instructor she recognized, Sergeant Major Williams, a 20-year veteran with multiple combat deployments. He had his simunition weapon trained on one of the hostages, creating a classic hostage situation that required split-second decision-making. "Drop your weapon," Williams said, playing his role perfectly. "Or the civilian dies." This was the moment that all the training had been building toward. Maria could hear Jackson and Rodriguez moving into the room behind her, but she was the one with the immediate tactical advantage. Williams was focused on her, which meant he couldn't effectively monitor the other entry points. Maria lowered her weapon slightly, appearing to comply with the demand. But, as she did so, she used hand signals to communicate with Rodriguez, who had moved into position behind Williams. It was a gamble that required perfect timing and complete trust between team members. "Okay," Maria said aloud, keeping Williams focused on her. "I'm putting my weapon down. Just don't hurt anyone." At the exact moment she set down, Rodriguez took his shot. The simunition round caught Williams in the back, ending the exercise scenario for this room. "All hostiles neutralized," Maria reported into her radio. 3 hostages secured and safe. The room fell silent except for the sound of heavy breathing from the team members. The hostages remained in character, some crying with relief, others thanking their rescuers. But Maria could see from Jackson's expression that her decision to leave her assigned position had created a problem that would need to be addressed. "Team Charlie, report to debrief immediately," came the voice of the exercise controller through their radios. As they moved toward the exit, Maria could see Commander Morrison waiting in the hallway. His expression was unreadable, but she knew that her performance was being evaluated at the highest levels. Whatever happened in the debrief would likely determine whether she continued in the program or was sent back to regular duties. The debrief room was a sterile conference room with fluorescent lighting and a long table surrounded by metal chairs. The team members sat on one side while Morrison and several other instructors sat across from them. Video monitors showed recordings of the exercise from multiple angles, allowing the instructors to review every decision and action. "Let's start with team leadership and coordination," Morrison said, looking directly at Jackson. "Walk me through your decision-making process." Jackson straightened in his chair. "Sir, we entered according to plan and began systematic clearance. When we encountered the hostile, I directed the team to establish overwatch and containment while we developed a tactical solution." "And how did that work out?" Morrison asked. "Well, sir, we successfully neutralized the threats and secured the hostages. But there were some deviations from the plan that created unnecessary risks." Morrison nodded and turned to Maria. "Santos, explain your actions during the engagement." Maria had been dreading this moment, but she knew that honesty was her only option.
Sir, when we encountered the hostile in the doorway, I observed that our current tactics weren't effective. I also identified hostages in immediate danger in the adjacent room. I made the decision to flank through an alternative route to gain tactical advantage. Without authorization from your team leader, Morrison stated. Yes, sir. Explain your reasoning. Maria took a deep breath. Sir, the mission parameters prioritized hostage safety above all other considerations. I assessed that our current approach was putting hostages at unnecessary risk and that immediate action was required to prevent casualties. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the video monitors. The recording showed Maria's movement through the building, her precise shots on the first hostile, and the coordination with Rodriguez that had neutralized the second threat. Rodriguez, Morrison said, what's your assessment of Santos's actions? Rodriguez glanced at Jackson before answering. Sir, her tactical assessment was correct. We were in a stalemate position, and the hostages were in immediate danger. Her flanking movement gave us the advantage we needed to complete the mission successfully. But it violated team discipline and chain of command, Jackson interjected. In a real combat situation, that kind of freelancing could get people killed. Morrison held up a hand for silence. Let's look at the results. Mission successful, all hostages rescued, all hostiles neutralized, 0 friendly casualties. By any measure, this was a textbook operation. He stood up and walked around the table to where Maria was sitting. Santos, your tactical decision-making was sound. Your execution was precise. But your failure to maintain team discipline is a serious concern. Maria felt her heart sinking. She had proven her abilities, but apparently that wasn't enough. Morrison continued. However, there are times in special operations when initiative and independent thinking are more valuable than strict adherence to protocol. The question is whether you can be trusted to know the difference. He returned to his seat and looked at the entire team. This exercise revealed both strengths and weaknesses in team dynamics. Jackson, your planning and coordination were solid, but you need to be more flexible when situations develop differently than expected. Rodriguez and Mueller, your individual performance was good, but team communication could be improved. Then, he focused on Maria again. Santos, your tactical skills are exceptional. Your physical capabilities are proven. But the question that remains is whether you can function effectively as part of a team while still exercising independent judgment when necessary. Maria wasn't sure how to respond. It sounded like Morrison was acknowledging her abilities while still questioning her suitability for the program. Sir, she said carefully, I understand the importance of team discipline. But I also understand that sometimes the mission requires adapting to circumstances that weren't anticipated in the original plan. Morrison nodded slowly. That's a mature assessment. But understanding something intellectually and being able to apply it in the field are two different things. He turned to address the entire team again. You have one more exercise in this training cycle, a final evaluation that will determine who continues to advanced special operations training and who returns to regular duties. This exercise will be more challenging than anything you've faced so far. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. Everything she had worked for was going to be decided by one final test. The scenario will be a hostage rescue in an unknown environment with multiple variables and real-time intelligence updates. You'll be working with unfamiliar team members, operating under severe time constraints, and dealing with rules of engagement that may change during the mission. Morrison stood up, indicating that the debrief was over. Use the next 48 hours to prepare. Study the materials provided, practice your individual skills, and think about what you've learned from today's exercise. Questions? No one spoke. The implications were clear, this was make or break time for everyone in the program. As the team filed out of the room, Morrison called after Maria. Santos, remain behind for a moment. Maria's stomach dropped, but she turned back to face the commander. When they were alone, Morrison walked over to close the door, then returned to stand in front of her. How badly do you want this? He asked without preamble. The question caught Maria off guard.
Sir? This program, this career path, proving yourself in special operations.
How badly do you want it? Maria looked directly into Morrison's eyes. More than anything, sir. This is what I've been preparing for my entire adult life.
Morrison studied her for a long moment.
I've been watching your performance since you arrived here 6 months ago.
You're technically proficient, physically capable, and mentally tough. But there's something else that sets apart the truly exceptional operators.
What's that, sir?
The ability to make the right decision under pressure, even when that decision might cost you everything. Morrison walked over to a wall locker and pulled out what appeared to be a standard military equipment case.
The final exercise is tomorrow night, not in 48 hours like I told the others. Maria's eyes widened. Sir? You're going to be inserted into a scenario where everything you think you know will be wrong.
Your team members won't be who you expect, the intelligence will be incomplete, and the stakes will be higher than any exercise you've experienced.
He set the case on the table between them. This case contains everything you'll need for the mission. But here's the critical part, you won't be allowed to open it until you're already in the field.
You'll have to trust that everything you need is there, and you'll have to make life or death decisions based on incomplete information. Maria stared at the case, trying to understand what Morrison was really telling her.
Is this part of the regular training program, sir? Morrison shook his head.
This is a special evaluation, designed specifically for candidates who show exceptional potential but need to prove they can handle the ultimate test of trust and responsibility. He walked back to face her directly. Tomorrow night, you'll be working with a SEAL team on what they believe is a real mission. They won't know it's an exercise. The only people who will know the truth are you, me, and the exercise controllers. The implications of what he was saying slowly sank in. Maria would be operating with a real SEAL team, people who trusted each other with their lives, and they would be counting on her without knowing that she was essentially a trainee.
Why are you telling me this, sir? Morrison was quiet for a moment before answering.
Because tomorrow night, one of those SEALs is going to hand you his weapon and trust you to watch his back while he does something that could get him killed. And you're going to have to decide whether you're worthy of that trust. Maria felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a heavy pack. Everything she had worked for, everything she had proven, was leading to this moment of ultimate testing.
What if I fail, sir?
Morrison picked up the equipment case and handed it to her. Then, you'll learn something important about yourself. But if you succeed, you'll have proven that you belong at the highest levels of special operations. As Maria took the case, she could feel her hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of knowing that her entire future was about to be decided by one mission.
Get some rest, Santos. Tomorrow night, everything changes.
As Maria left the debrief room, her mind was racing with questions and possibilities. She had thought today's exercise was the ultimate test, but now she realized it had only been preparation for something much more significant. Walking back to her quarters, she passed other soldiers from the program who were discussing their own performances and speculating about the final evaluation. None of them knew what she knew, that tomorrow would bring a test unlike anything they had imagined. In her room that night, Maria sat on her bunk with the equipment case beside her. She wasn't allowed to open it, but she could feel its weight and hear something shifting inside when she moved it. Tomorrow, whatever was in that case might make the difference between success and failure, between proving herself worthy of trust and being sent back to regular duties. As she lay down to sleep, Maria's thoughts turned to her father's words from years earlier, "Show them what you can do instead." Tomorrow night, she would have the opportunity to do exactly that, but the stakes would be higher than anything she had ever imagined.
The next morning brought no relief from the tension.
Maria went through her normal routine, physical training, equipment maintenance, studying tactical manuals, but her mind kept returning to Morrison's words about trust and ultimate testing. She watched the other soldiers in the program going about their preparations for what they thought would be their final evaluation in 2 days. Some seemed confident, others nervous, but none of them carried the weight of knowing that their futures would be decided much sooner than expected. As evening approached, Maria received a message to report to the flight line at 2,100 hours with full combat equipment and the case Morrison had given her. She still hadn't opened it, following instructions even though her curiosity was overwhelming. The flight line was busy with helicopters and support personnel preparing for various missions. Maria reported to the designated area and found Morrison waiting with 4 men she had never seen before. They were obviously special operations personnel. Their bearing, equipment, and the way they carried themselves marked them as elite soldiers. "Santos," Morrison said as she approached, "meet your team for tonight's mission." The 4 SEALs standing before Maria represented 15 years of combined special operations experience. Their leader was Chief Petty Officer Mike Reeves, a calm, methodical operator with deployments to every major conflict zone of the past decade. His team included Rodriguez, not the Rodriguez from her training program, but Petty Officer First Class Carlos Rodriguez, a communications specialist with expert marksmanship skills. The other 2 team members were Petty Officer Second Class Danny Murphy, a demolitions expert whose youthful appearance masked years of dangerous missions, and Petty Officer Third Class Jake Chen, the team's medic and newest member, though he still had more real combat experience than Maria had training exercises.
"Gentlemen," Morrison said, "this is Sergeant Santos. She'll be augmenting your team for tonight's mission." Chief Reeves studied Maria with the evaluating gaze of a professional soldier. She could see him taking in her equipment, her bearing, and trying to assess her capabilities based on limited information. "What's her background?" Reeves asked Morrison directly.
"Advanced combat training graduate, top 10% of her class, specialized in urban operations and communications," Morrison replied. It was accurate, but Maria noticed that he didn't mention this was essentially her final exam. "No disrespect intended," Reeves said, looking at Maria, "but we've been working together as a team for 2 years.
Adding a new element to a mission profile changes our dynamics." Morrison nodded. "Understood, Chief.
But the mission parameters require additional communications support, and Santos is the most qualified available operator." Maria appreciated that Morrison was giving her credibility with the team, but she also understood Reeves's concern. In special operations, team chemistry could mean the difference between life and death.
Bringing in an unknown quantity at the last minute was far from ideal. "What can you tell us about the mission?" Reeves asked Morrison.
Morrison gestured toward a nearby briefing trailer.
"Full details inside. But the overview is a time-sensitive hostage recovery in an urban environment. Intelligence suggests a narrow window of opportunity, which is why we're moving tonight."
As they walked toward the trailer, Maria noticed that the SEALs moved with an easy confidence that came from years of working together. They communicated with gestures and glances, finishing each other's thoughts without needing to speak. She would have to find her place in that dynamic quickly. Inside the trailer, large monitors displayed satellite imagery of a compound in what appeared to be a Middle Eastern urban environment. Morrison began the briefing immediately, his voice crisp and professional.
"Intelligence indicates that 3 American contractors were taken hostage 48 hours ago during an attack on their convoy. Current location is believed to be this compound in the eastern sector of the city."
The satellite imagery showed a 2-story concrete building surrounded by smaller structures and narrow alleyways. It was the kind of environment that special operations teams train for regularly, but also the kind of place where everything could go wrong very quickly. Opposition force is estimated at 6 to 8 hostiles, armed with automatic weapons and possibly explosives.
Rules of engagement are weapons-free, but hostage safety is the primary mission parameter. Chief Reeves studied the imagery carefully. "What's our insertion method?"
"Fast rope from helicopters onto the compound roof. You'll have approximately 15 minutes from insertion to extraction before local security forces complicate the situation." 15 minutes was a tight timeline for any mission, but especially for a hostage rescue where careful room-to-room clearing was essential for safety.
"Communications?" Reeves asked. Morrison looked directly at Maria.
"Santos will maintain contact with Overwatch elements and coordinate with extraction team. She'll also provide backup to primary assault elements as needed." Maria realized that once again, she was being assigned a support role rather than a primary action position. But she also understood that earning the team's trust would require proving herself in whatever capacity they needed. Rodriguez, the SEAL communications specialist, turned to Maria.
What systems are you trained on?
PRC-152, PRC-117, Sinker's family, and satellite communications, Maria replied. I'm also qualified on battlefield damage assessment and can coordinate close air support if needed.
Rodriguez nodded approvingly.
Good. I'll handle primary communications, but having backup is always smart. Murphy, the demolitions expert, pointed at the compound walls on the satellite image. Those walls look pretty solid.
If we need rapid entry, what are you carrying for breaching? This was where Maria's preparation would be tested. She gestured to the equipment case Morrison had given her.
I have specialized breaching equipment, but I haven't had a chance to inventory it yet.
Chen, the medic, looked concerned. You haven't checked your own gear?
Maria felt the weight of their skepticism, but she couldn't explain that she wasn't allowed to open the case without revealing the true nature of the exercise.
The equipment was packed by logistics specialists.
It should contain everything needed for the mission profile.
Chief Reeves exchanged glances with his team members. Maria could see that her answer hadn't inspired confidence.
In the special operations community, operators were expected to know their equipment intimately.
We'll sort out equipment distribution on the helicopter, Reeves decided. Right now, let's focus on the tactical plan.
For the next 30 minutes, they reviewed building layouts, discussed approach routes, and assigned responsibilities for different phases of the mission.
Maria found herself impressed by the team's professionalism and attention to detail. Every potential complication was discussed, every contingency planned for.
As the briefing concluded, Morrison addressed the team one final time.
Questions or concerns? Reeves looked at his men, then back at Morrison. We're ready to execute, sir. Good. Helicopters lift off in 15 minutes. Good luck.
As they left the briefing trailer and walked toward the flight line, Maria could feel the tension building. This was really happening. She was about to go on a mission with a real SEAL team, and they were counting on her to perform at their level. The helicopter was a modified Black Hawk configured for special operations missions. As they climbed aboard and strapped in, Maria noticed that the SEALs went through their equipment checks with practiced efficiency. She decided this was the right time to finally open her equipment case. Inside, she found exactly what she needed for the mission: breaching charges, additional ammunition, communications equipment, and medical supplies. But there was also something unexpected: a small note in Morrison's handwriting that simply said, "Trust your training." Rodriguez noticed her examining the breaching charges. "Those are some serious explosives," he said over the helicopter's noise.
"You qualified on them?"
Maria nodded, though her experience with those particular charges came from training rather than combat.
"I can handle them if needed."
As the helicopter lifted off, Chief Reeves gathered the team for a final mission brief. "Remember, we go in fast and hard.
Santos, you stick with me and Rodriguez until we clear the first floor. Murphy and Chen take the second floor. Questions?"
Maria shook her head along with the others. The plan was clear, and her role was defined. But she could still see uncertainty in the team's eyes about how she would perform under pressure. The flight to the target area took 20 minutes. As they approached, Maria could see the compound below, exactly as it had appeared in the satellite imagery. Lights were on in several buildings, and she could see movement in the central courtyard.
2 minutes out, the helicopter crew chief announced over the intercom. The SEALs began final preparations, checking weapons and adjusting equipment.
Maria followed their lead, making sure her radio was properly configured and her ammunition was easily accessible.
1 minute out.
Prepare for fast rope. This was it, the moment when months of training would be tested in a real-world scenario. Maria moved to the helicopter door with the others, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system.
30 seconds. Check your equipment one last time. Maria could see the compound growing larger below them.
The helicopter was coming in low and fast, using buildings for concealment until the last possible moment.
Go, go, go. Chief Reeves was first out the door, sliding down the rope with practiced ease. Rodriguez followed, then Murphy and Chen.
Maria was last, gripping the rope and controlling her descent toward the compound roof. As her feet touched the concrete, the helicopter was already pulling away, disappearing into the night sky.
They were on their own now, 5 operators in hostile territory with a mission to complete and limited time to do it. Reeves immediately moved the team toward the roof access door.
Intelligence had indicated it should be unlocked, providing entry to the building's upper level. Murphy deployed a small surveillance camera to check for any opposition before they made their move. Clear on the stairs, he whispered into his radio. They moved into the building in tactical formation, Maria following Reeves and Rodriguez as planned. The interior was dimly lit, with narrow hallways and multiple doors that could conceal either hostages or hostiles. The building was silent except for the sound of their own breathing and the soft shuffle of their boots on concrete floors. This was the most dangerous phase of any hostage rescue, the initial entry when everything was unknown and every door could hide a threat. Rodriguez signaled for a halt as they approached the first room. Through the thin walls, they could hear voices, multiple people speaking in what sounded like Arabic. Intelligence briefings had indicated that the hostiles were local militia members, but hearing actual voices made the situation feel immediately real.
Reeves made hand signals indicating his tactical plan.
Rodriguez would breach the door, Maria would provide cover from the hallway, and Reeves would handle any immediate threats. It was a standard room-clearing procedure, but knowing that real hostages and real bullets were involved made every detail critical. Rodriguez positioned himself beside the door, his weapon ready.
Maria took cover position where she could support him if needed. Reeves prepared to follow Rodriguez into the room once the breach was executed.
The door burst open with a sharp crack, and Rodriguez moved into the room with fluid precision. Maria could hear shouting from inside, Arabic voices raised in alarm, then the sharp crack of gunfire.
Contact. 2 hostiles down.
Rodriguez reported through his radio. But, as Maria moved to follow Reeves into the room, she heard something that changed everything. From deeper in the building came a woman's voice screaming in English, "Please help us. They have guns." It was a hostage, and she sounded like she was in immediate danger. Maria made a split-second decision that would define her entire military career. Instead of following Reeves into the cleared room, she broke off toward the voice. It was coming from the far end of the hallway, through a door that intelligence reports had indicated should be empty.
"Santos, where are you going?" Reeves called after her.
"Hostage in distress, far room," she replied into her radio, already moving down the hallway. As she approached the door, Maria could hear multiple voices inside, the woman who had screamed, a man's voice trying to calm her, and what sounded like children crying. But she could also hear movement that suggested at least one hostile in the room. This was exactly the kind of situation her training had prepared her for, but nothing could really prepare someone for the reality of knowing that innocent lives hung in the balance of every decision she made. Maria positioned herself beside the door and tried to assess the situation inside. Through a crack in the doorframe, she could see part of the room. There were definitely hostages. She could see a woman tied to a chair and what appeared to be a teenage boy sitting on the floor. But she could also see an armed figure moving in the shadows, someone who appeared to be guarding the hostages while staying ready to respond to any rescue attempt. "Reeves, I have eyes on multiple hostages in the end room, with at least one guard," Maria reported quietly into her radio.
"Negative, Santos. Wait for backup before engaging." But, even as Reeves was speaking, Maria heard the distinctive sound of a weapon being chambered inside the room. Someone was preparing to fire, and the hostages were in the direct line of danger. Maria made another decision that went against orders but followed the deepest principles of her training. She couldn't wait for backup when innocent lives were about to be lost. She pushed through the door low and fast, her weapon ready and her mind focused on identifying threats while avoiding harm to the hostages. The room was larger than she had expected, with multiple pieces of furniture that could provide cover for either hostages or hostiles. The armed guard was exactly where she had expected him to be,
but he was even more dangerous than intelligence had indicated. He had a hostage, the teenage boy, positioned directly in front of him as a human shield, and his weapon was pointed at the other hostages. "Drop your weapon or they all die," the guard said in heavily accented English. This was the ultimate test of everything Maria had learned about tactical decision-making under pressure. She could see Chief Reeves entering the room behind her, but she was the one with the immediate tactical advantage and the clear shot. The guard was focused on her, which meant he couldn't effectively monitor the entire room. But he also had his finger on the trigger, and any miscalculation could result in multiple hostage deaths. Maria slowly began to lower her weapon, appearing to comply with the guard's demand. But, as she did so, she used subtle hand signals to communicate with Reeves, indicating the guard's exact position and the location of all the hostages. "Okay," Maria said aloud, keeping the guard's attention focused on her. "I'm putting my weapon down.
Just don't hurt anyone."
At the exact moment she said the word down, Maria dove to her left while Reeves took his shot from behind. The guard's weapon discharged, but his aim was thrown off by Maria's movement and Reeves's simultaneous action. The simunition round struck the wall where Maria had been standing a split second earlier. The guard himself was hit center mass by Reeves's shot, ending the immediate threat to the hostages. But, as the room fell silent, Maria realized that something was wrong.
The hostages weren't reacting the way real people would react to being rescued. They weren't showing relief or gratitude or even shock.
They were sitting quietly, waiting for instructions.
Then, she heard Morrison's voice coming through the building's communication system: "Exercise complete. All personnel remain in position for debrief." The realization hit Maria like a physical blow. This had been another training exercise, but one so realistic that even the SEAL team had believed it was a real mission. Morrison had told her they wouldn't know the truth, but she hadn't fully understood what that meant until this moment. Chief Reeves lowered his weapon and looked at Maria with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Outstanding tactical work," he said simply. Rodriguez entered the room behind them, surveying the scene. "Good coordination under pressure."
That was a textbook hostage rescue. But Maria was still processing what had just happened. For the past hour, she had believed she was on a real combat mission with real stakes and real consequences. Every decision had been made with the understanding that lives hung in the balance. Morrison appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable as always.
"Debrief in 5 minutes," he announced.
As they walked out of the building, Chief Reeves fell into step beside Maria. "How long have you been in special operations?" he asked. "This was actually my final training exercise," Maria replied honestly. "I'm still technically in the advanced combat program."
Reeves stopped walking and stared at her. "You're telling me that was a training exercise for you? Not for us, but for you specifically?"
Maria nodded, unsure how he would react to learning that he had been unknowingly participating in her evaluation. Reeves was quiet for a moment, then started walking again.
"Well, you fooled me. I thought you were an experienced operator. Your performance in that room was as good as anyone I've worked with."
Rodriguez overheard the conversation and joined them.
"Wait, this whole mission was your final exam?"
"That explains the equipment case and why you hadn't checked your gear." "I hope you're not angry about being part of the evaluation without knowing," Maria said. Murphy and Chen had caught up with them now, and Rodriguez filled them in on what they had just learned. Maria braced herself for their reaction, expecting them to feel deceived or manipulated.
Instead, Murphy started laughing. "That's actually pretty smart training design.
The only way to really test someone's abilities is to put them in a situation where they think the stakes are real."
Chen nodded in agreement.
"And you performed like you belonged here. That coordination with the chief in the final room, that was professional level work." As they reached the debrief area, Maria felt a mix of relief, exhaustion, and pride. She had passed the test, but, more importantly, she had earned the respect of operators whose opinions actually mattered. The debrief was conducted by Morrison and several other senior special operations officers. They reviewed the entire mission from multiple perspectives, analyzing tactical decisions and team coordination. The mission was successful by all measures, Morrison announced. Hostages rescued, threats neutralized, 0 friendly casualties, and execution within time parameters. He then turned his attention to Maria specifically. Santos, your performance exceeded expectations. Your tactical decision-making, weapons handling, and team coordination were all at the level we expect from experienced special operations personnel. Chief Reeves spoke up from across the room. Sir, if I may, I'd like to offer an assessment from the team perspective. Morrison nodded for him to continue. When you told us we were getting an additional team member for this mission, I was concerned about introducing an unknown element into our established dynamics. But Santos integrated seamlessly into our operations. Her performance was indistinguishable from that of an experienced team member. Rodriguez added, her communications work was flawless, and her tactical awareness in the final engagement showed the kind of split-second decision-making that keeps people alive in real combat situations. Morrison listened to their assessments, then stood up and walked over to where Maria was sitting. In his hand, he held something that made her heart skip a beat, his sidearm, a .45 caliber pistol that represented years of combat experience and countless missions. Santos, he said, holding out the weapon, I'm going to trust you with this. Maria stared at the weapon, understanding the significance of what Morrison was offering. In the special operations community, being trusted with another operator's weapon was one of the highest honors possible. It meant that person trusted you with their life and the lives of their teammates. Sir, Maria said as she accepted the weapon, I understand the responsibility that comes with this trust. Morrison nodded. I believe you do. And, based on your performance tonight, I believe you've earned the right to continue to the next phase of special operations training. The room fell silent as the implications of Morrison's words sank in. Maria had not just passed her final evaluation, she had been accepted into the highest levels of military special operations. Chief Reeves stood up and extended his hand to Maria. Welcome to the community, he said simply. As Maria shook hands with each member of the SEAL team, she realized that everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed and endured, had led to this moment. She had proven that she belonged among the elite, not because she was a woman breaking barriers, but because she was a professional soldier capable of performing at the highest levels. Morrison dismissed the debrief, but, as the others were leaving, he motioned for Maria to remain behind. How do you feel? He asked when they were alone. Maria thought carefully before answering. Grateful for the opportunity, sir. And ready for whatever comes next. Morrison smiled, the first time she had seen him show genuine emotion. What comes next is the real work. Tonight was about proving you could handle the pressure and earn trust under extreme circumstances. But special operations is about much more than individual performance. It's about being part of something larger than yourself. He gestured toward the door where the SEALs had exited. Those men will trust you with their lives now, and you'll have to trust them with yours. That's a responsibility that goes beyond anything you've experienced in training. Maria nodded, understanding that tonight had been not an ending, but a beginning. I'm ready for that responsibility, sir. I believe you are, Morrison replied. Report to Advanced Special Operations Training next Monday. And, Santos? Yes, sir? Keep my weapon until you earn one of your own. Consider it a reminder of the trust that's been placed in you. As Maria left the debrief room, she carried Morrison's sidearm with a sense of pride and responsibility that she had never experienced before. She had proven that she could earn trust through performance, that she belonged among the elite operators of the military's special operations community. The young woman who had started this journey 6 months earlier, fighting for respect and struggling to prove her worth, had been transformed into something different. She was now a special operations soldier, trusted by her peers and ready to take on the most dangerous missions her country might require. As she walked across the base toward her quarters, Maria thought about her father's words from years earlier, show them what you can do instead. Tonight, she had done exactly that. But, more importantly, she had learned that earning trust wasn't about proving others wrong, it was about proving yourself worthy of the faith that others placed in you. The weapon in her holster was more than just a tool, it was a symbol of the trust that had been earned through months of preparation, moments of doubt, and, ultimately, performance when it mattered most. And, as Maria looked ahead to the challenges that awaited her in advanced special operations training, she knew that she was ready for whatever tests and trials lay ahead. She had proven that they couldn't pass her by anymore. Now she was one of them, and that made all the difference in the world.